Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started shortly. This is the Clean Economy Solutions in Action event about rural renewable energy and broadband through electrical co-ops. Today, we have a wonderful story to share with you about a New Mexico-based electrical co-op, Carson Electric, and their transition to 100% daytime solar energy by 2022. My name is Camilla Simon, and I'm the Director of Hispanics Enjoying Camping, Hunting, and the Outdoors, or HECHO. HECHO was founded in 2013 by a group of Hispanic elected officials and community leaders from across the Southwest who had concerns about the impact of oil and gas development on the lands where they fished, hunted, camped, and hiked. They were also concerned about the fact that Hispanics are also among the racial ethnic groups who are underrepresented in the decision-making processes that impact our air, water, land, health, and communities. So they formed HECHO to help close the gap between underrepresentation when it comes to decision-making by engaging in public land and advocacy conversations, creating greater access and equity to our public lands while connecting to our role as stewards of the land. Today, HECHO is going strong and working to strengthen Hispanic and Latinx voices and visibility and conservation. And while our focus is on the conservation of public lands in the American Southwest, our work has a national scope and impact. Earlier this year, we partnered with the National Wildlife Federation's Environmental Justice Program to co-host a series of clean economy roundtables, convening over 50 leaders from across the country, representing national and community-based organizations, to discuss priorities and recommendations that ensure communities of color understand, access, and economically benefit from federal investments in infrastructure and clean energy. Building off of those roundtables today, we're taking a closer look at what we consider a clean economy solution in action that has the potential to be scaled up across the country with the right kind of support that could be delivered as part of a federal infrastructure policy package. So for today's event, we will have each of our guests present the story of Carson Electric's transition to solar. Then we'll have a moderated discussion. And then at the end, we'll have some time for your questions and for the presenters to give you some answers. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Luis Reyes. Luis Reyes Jr. has been Chief Executive Officer and General Manager at Carson Electric since 1993. Mr. Reyes began his work with Carson Electric in 1984 as a system engineer. He serves as Chairman and Director of National Rural Telecommunications Cooperative. He serves on the boards of Kit Carson Museum, the Taos Business Alliance, Citizens of Economic Diversity, and Leadership New Mexico. As CEO of Kit Carson Rural Electric Cooperative in northern New Mexico, Luis Reyes has provided vision and leadership to turn the co-op into a company that offers a variety of diverse, competitive services, including broadband, internet, renewable energy alternatives, and low-cost propane. His dedication to the co-op's mission is to deliver exceptional customer service with efficiency, professionalism, accountability, and develop sustainable economic opportunities, which benefits its service communities. He has thrust the co-op into the limelight regionally and nationally. And we also have Chris Miller. The Navy has played a key role in Chris's life. It's where he met his friend and future Guzman energy partner, Chris Riley, where he met his wife, Alexis, and where he served as a commander in the US Navy Reserves until 2019. After graduating from the United States Naval Academy, Naval War College, and Naval Postgraduate School, he served as a chief engineer of a guided missile destroyer and as a boatswain mate in the Pacific. Chris became chief operating officer at the investment bank Guzman and Company before branching out and starting Guzman Energy in 2013, and he holds an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. He is the proud dad of 3 and proud son of Douglasville, Georgia. I will pass it now to Luis.
Good afternoon, Camilla. Thank you very much. And thank you to HECHO for allowing us to share our story about how Kit Carson has gone from what I would consider uh, kind of a typical cooperative to really an economic and environmental driver in north central New Mexico. As you see, we've put on and so what I want to do is highlight our journey uh, that Kit Carson has made, it really in conjunction with its members. Kit Carson Electric is a co-op that was formed in 1944. It serves three counties, Taos, Rio Arriba, and Colfax County. We serve six municipalities, and we serve two tribes, two pueblos actually, Taos Pueblo and Picaris Pueblo. In 1951, because of the co-ops being so rural, we formed a generation transmission co-op to serve multiple co-ops needs. And really that model worked for quite a while as they aggregated all the load and then resold the power to us. And so, that was pretty good growth, pretty kind of regular utility work. I think one of the first milestones that occurred with Kit Carson was in 1993, when we had the opportunity to really go from being a electric co-op to really entering into economic development to help our local people uh, help enable our businesses to grow. And so Kit Carson actually got the state law changed so that we could borrow money to relend it to incubators. And we started what today is known as Taos County Economic Development Corporation, and which was focused on ag. And so that opened the door for every co-op in the state to really get into economic development and use some of their sources uh, to fund local economic development ventures. In about 1998, I'm not sure if those on the Zoom remember Enron, but Enron was going to take over the world. They were going to dominate the energy markets, and that really concerned us, being a small rural co-op in north central New Mexico. And by the way, we serve about 30,000 members, so we're a mid-sized co-op. So we thought we went to our members and asked if Enron took our biggest loads, took our ski areas, took our state buildings, took our industrial load, how are we going to survive? And so the members instructed Kit Carson to get into different businesses and diversify. First one was propane. Second one was internet. The third was economic development. And then the fourth was actually gas stations. And so we set out on that kind of journey to satisfy the members, and again to create jobs, create opportunities, to keep our young people here in our area. We're not immune to what's happening to other places in rural New Mexico, rural America, where our youth are leaving because there's no opportunities. And we felt that was now a goal of the co-op. And so we started our propane company, which actually has done very well. Uh, we started our internet company, which, to be honest, we took a lot of criticism back in 2000. What is an electric co-op doing getting into non-electric ventures? But we always would fall back on our members wanted to do that. And that's the strength of the co-op model, is the democracy, the democratic control of the members over their elected officials. And so we started our internet company, and then we actually recruited some call centers and actually built a call center to start employing people. That call center went online around 2001 and employed about 200 full-time employees. And then we wanted to use some of our natural talents, so we recruited a Spanish-speaking call center that worked with clients who their primary language is Spanish. And so we did that business for about 7 or 8 years. Around that same time, our power supplier, Tri-State, and Plains Electric merged, and we became a huge D&T. And so we went down that venture as far as power supply, and we ran into some issues right off. One of the main issues was we were only allowed up to 5% of our entire generation could be renewable. You know, sitting in north central in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where there's 300 days of sunshine, doing solar uh, is a thing we should be doing. And at that time, our power supplier really didn't let us do that. And so we struggled for a few years and trying to find solutions, ways where we could enable that number to have a higher percentage of solar. And really, we're not successful. But we continued. We continued with our economic development. In 2010, we awarded a $64 million broadband grant to build about 3,000 miles of fiber optic to every home and business that we serve. And in 2017, we completed that. So today, Kit Carson has about 9,000 subscribers on our network, all with the ability to get up to a gig to their home or business. We have just recently got some more funds to build to another 9,000. So our hope is within the next 5 years, every member of Kit Carson will have high-speed internet to their home or business. That's second to no one in the country. Just imagine for those where you live, if you can have access to gig service that is carrier class. It's reliable, it's redundant, and it really has give us that foundation to again further our economic development and our electric operation, as we now have a smart grid in which we can do a lot of things remotely and in real time. Kind of stepping back a bit, in 2016, right before we finished our fiber optic network, we had the opportunity to exit Tri-State. And in exiting Tri-State, we paid an exit fee. We found a power supplier who really had the same mindset, the same care, the same vision of what a co-op should do in taking care of the environment and enabling its members to get the power supply that they wanted. And so we left Tri-State and went with Guzman Energy. And in my 38 years here at the cooperative, that's probably been the best move that the co-op has made. In doing that, though, shortly after our exit of Tri-State to Guzman, we sat down with the folks at Guzman, Chris Miller and his team, and developed a plan. Could Kit Carson reach 100% daytime solar? And if we could, by when? And so Guzman came down to Taos, and for 3 days, we met with every group that wanted to meet with us, environmental groups, elected officials, pueblos, tribes, individual members, financial institutions, you name it. We met to get their input. And at the end of the day, it came out that we want you to be 100% daytime solar by 2022. And so I turned to Chris and says, can we do that? And, he said yes, but today I don't, at that was a pretty ambitious goal. Today, we're a year ahead. We will hit our 100% daytime solar by December of this year. We'll also start integrating batteries. And we got basically full community support with this venture. And it really now shows that the identity that we kind of Northern New Mexicans always wanted, and it's kind of walking the talk and caring, taking care of the environment, taking care of the outdoors, those that make North Central New Mexico very special. And so we continued on that path, and now we have started, pursuant to our members, to start an EV program. And so this April, our members got together. I called a meeting of all the elected officials, all the key players. I thought when we had this EV meeting, we would have half a dozen people. We had over 70 people show up, and today we're forming working groups with a goal within the next 5 years to get every locale, municipality, county, school, get their fleets uh, uh, electric vehicles. And so that's the next step in our journey with our members, is then to clean up our transportation space. I think going with all those programs we're going, I think one of the underlying themes that we always look at is our programs are only good in co-op areas, in rural areas, if we're inclusive of everybody. And so we've really taken on this inclusivity that regardless of who you are, if you're a tribal member or low income, or you just moved into town, or you're the wealthiest person in town, that you need to be treated fairly, and that you have access to affordable energy. You have access to broadband. Uh, you have access, hopefully in the future, to electric vehicles. That when you're a member of Kit Carson, no one's going to be left behind. That we're going to find out ways and solutions to enable every member to benefit on these programs, and it has worked. Uh, like I mentioned, today we have many of our mayors, if not all of them, sitting on these committees to look at how do we electrify our fleets. We've dubbed ourselves the solar capital of the world. We got a lot of interest. We have the only two community solar facilities in the state of New Mexico, one serving Picaris Pueblo, and one serving moderate and low income folks. And so we've also been able to create a model where moderate and low income folks can participate in these programs. Something that really isn't happening anywhere else in the country. Our other goal is really to create a model that other communities, other regions of the country can follow. Because I do think this democratic process of the electric co-ops is very powerful. It gives everyone a voice, and it gives everyone basically a seat at the table. And so as we look forward into the future, our goal is to hit or to make Kit Carson a carbon-free co-op, by 2035. And I can't underscore the importance of having a partner like Guzman, who really shares that same vision, which is very important in the power supply world. Sometimes today, and we've had the experience of having two different power suppliers before Guzman. Sometimes there's too much focus on the bottom line, or there's too much focus on being too cautious. And something I see a lot that's happening is leaders are forgetting to lead and to listen to their members. And I think the strength of the co-op, the strength of Kit Carson has been listening to its members, and then enabling the members to move forward with their wishes, really not my wishes or the board's wishes. And so, from a high level, I just wanted to share that story of how Kit Carson continues to lead. This ride has been a great ride, but it always hasn't been perfect. It does have its ups and downs. In a state like New Mexico that is, from a budget perspective, very heavily dependent on oil and gas, we're kind of breaking new ground, and we really do think you can create a clean energy economy built about renewable energy, built about storage, built around broadband. I think broadband is going to be the kind of the kind of the cement what binds us all together. And if you make it accessible to everybody, I really do think for rural communities, especially in the northern part of the state of New Mexico, that really is going to be key to our success. Broadband can help attract clean businesses and continue to help maintain that quality of life that our members want and that tourists from around the world come to visit. So with that, Camilla, thank you very much for allowing me to share my story.
Muted, Camilla.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just was saying thank you so much, Luis, for sharing that story. It's really impressive. We are so proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and really heard you say out loud how important it is to have members involved in all of that, as well as the community, and how important it is to have a partner with you in this, like Guzman Energy. So I'd like to pass it off now to Chris Miller, president of Guzman Energy.
So thanks, Camilla. Thanks, Luis, for those great sort of remarks, and hello to everybody that's out in the Facebook Live community and the folks that are here on this this particular Zoom. You know, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to give some sort of mediocre history and even worse physics. I think there is you know, there's people on this from San Diego, there's people from Maryland, there's people from Georgia, and sort of what that energy marketplace looks like is different in each one of those areas. And so I'm going to try to like cram 200 years of electrical history and sort of articulate a little bit about what exactly a wholesale provider is, how our relationship with Luis works, and I'm going to try to do that in less than 15 minutes. So wish me luck, and if you're a physics or history professor, don't hold my liberties against me. So, you know, Guzman Energy was started in 2013, and it was started by Leopoldo Guzman, who is a Cuban American. He came over under the Pedro Plan in the 1950s, and then he's a true sort of American success story in every sense of the word. He and a couple of Navy guys, myself included, founded Guzman Energy, and it was driven under the idea that there was a better way and a more market force driven way to deliver and serve electricity in the United States. And so Luis alluded to a little bit, Enron, the energy markets deregulated in the 90s. And up until that point, they had been viewed so critical that they were monopolies, and they were monopolies that were governed in such a way that there was very, very limited competition. And when Enron came along, they had some really unique and interesting ideas right up until they began breaking the law and cooking the books, and sort of that story unfolded the way that story unfolded. But, you know, it blunted a little bit of the free market participation. And around 2012, 13, we started looking at the markets and saying, you know, there's a much better market driven way to be able to serve and deliver wholesale power that is focused and emphasized on helping transition the energy economy in communities that are sort of least represented. And that brought us to co-ops, because if you think about big cities, they're served by investor-owned, vertically integrated utilities, and we'll sort of talk quickly about that. But, you know, the purpose of my remarks, I want to give a little bit of history, talk a little bit about physics, and then talk a little bit about our relationship with Kit Carson, and I'll try to do that again in about 15 minutes. So the electricity grid is the most complex machine that I can think of. You know, it spans from Maine to San Diego. It is old technology and new technology integrated together. It's fossil fuels, it's renewables, it's some battery storage. It is this amalgamation of technologies, old and new. And then layered on top of that is a regulatory body that is state regulations, local regulations, and federal regulations, and it makes for this complicated rat's nest of an electrical design system that is interconnected, interdependent, and also in a lot of ways antiquated. And so that's part of what's happening and we're working towards now. You know, you think over the last 20 years, we've been able to have one of these in our pockets that's the most powerful computer we would have ever had. But the electricity grid and the technology that have supported it have really not evolved that much. We went from a blockbuster video world to a Netflix world in a relatively short period of time, but the electrical grid and the energy infrastructure of the country hasn't evolved that much. In the late 1800s, the electrification of the United States occurred. I got a picture of Thomas Edison here behind me, but Thomas Edison in New York he created the light bulb, began developing what would become modern electricity companies. And most of the major integrated utilities today still have Edison in their name somehow, in some way. But what happened in New York, initially they built a big generator and reactor downtown, and then eventually they moved it out into the countryside where they had generation displaced. So the system that was making the electric power was outside of the city. And then there was long transmission lines coming and bringing that power in to service the city. And that's the end of 1800s, the early 1900s, that system starts to evolve. It gets exported to cities like Chicago and the larger cities at that phase of the life of the country begin to get electrified by having generation built outside of their geographical city areas and long transmission bringing it into the cities. And so that was the earliest phases of electrification in the United States. Up until the New Deal, that was pretty much what we had. And then as the New Deal came along, Franklin Roosevelt's programs expanded what would become what we know as electrical co-ops. And then there's two phases of electrical co-ops. There's a generation and transmission cooperative, and then there's a distribution cooperative. And Luis falls under that bucket of a distribution cooperative. And so the generation and transmission are just like it sounds. They produce electricity and then they move it via transmission. And that becomes important because there's also some diversity in how that's regulated. Transmission is regulated at the federal level. Generation and wholesale markets is regulated at the state and local levels, or people can be elected to be regulated at the federal level. So it gets complicated, but there's a distribution co-op and a generation and transmission co-op. And that really was the second phase of the electrification of the United States. A New Deal program that was focused on bringing electricity and bringing power to rural parts of the country that had been underrepresented by by the vertically integrated utilities that were mostly built in around metropolitan areas. So that's a quick version of how we got from Thomas Edison creating the light bulb and the first set of electrical generation to where we are today in a relatively similar system of the generation and transmission and distribution co-ops that are mostly in rural areas and mostly in communities where HECHO has representation and Luis and similar types of diverse communities outside in the bilateral West. Now, how do we talk about the markets today? And what makes these markets also unique is if you're in Georgia, which I saw somebody on here is in Georgia, they're served by some version of the Southern Company, and it is not an organized market. The bilateral West is also not an organized market, but for the participant who's on in Maryland, they're in an organized market. And the difference between an organized market and a bilateral market, which is where we are in Colorado, New Mexico, and this portion of the West, is an organized market is just like it sounds. There's a market price set each day, and in fact, twice in some day. And it's like going into to a big marketplace where you have an opportunity to buy fruits and vegetables and different things, but power prices are being set based on a demand. And so you can buy and sell from anybody inside of that marketplace. And that's a grotesque oversimplification, but just think marketplace where you're able to buy power and the market helps set the prices. In the bilateral West, that is a relationship between two individual counterparties. So in the case of Guzman and Kit Carson, we sell Kit Carson their wholesale power each month. And that, a generation and transmission can sell wholesale power. Another wholesale provider can sell wholesale power. And this is where I suspend all aspects of physics and belief, because this is not possible. But an oversimplification of this is think that Guzman Energy takes one of those big orange Home Depot buckets of electrons each month. We go and we hand it to Luis, and Luis goes in and takes a little dipper, and he dips some out to the church, he dips some out to the hospital, he dips some out to the community center, and he dips some out to individual homes. And that is the process by which a wholesaler does that. So on the distribution side, you know, Luis reads the meters, he services his transmission lines that he has locally. He makes sure that people have electricity in their homes, but he is purchasing a block of wholesale electric power that Guzman Energy manages in real time to make sure that we're meeting and balancing the load being served in Kit Carson. If you live in a major metropolitan area, you're most likely served by what's called a vertically integrated utility. And these are large, you know, think Excel here in the Denver area. I'm in Denver right now, and all of this power is served by Excel, and they're vertically integrated. And what that means is they own the generation, they own the transmission. The way they're able to build new assets is by their rate base. So their customers pay and help them build new assets for generation. So if they want to build a solar facility, it is funded by the ratepayers that pay for the electricity through Excel. If a wholesale provider wants to build a new generation facility, they build it themselves on their own balance sheet. And so that is a little bit of a distinction, but it's sort of an important distinction. And when you think, and this is again, it's an overgeneralization, but if you think wholesale providers typically are outside of major metropolitan concentration areas, and that's part of, again, how sort of the grid and the system evolved. And so wholesale, we take Luis a big bucket of electrons each month, we give it to him, and he gives it out distribution to his community, to his ratepayers, and to his to his constituents that he serves inside of those 3 counties. And so, you know, going to think a little bit about that, let's think about how that works and how that bucket of electrons transitions into Luis being able to go to the opportunity that they've had in their communities to enroll and bring in so much solar and so much sort of renewable and make their vision sort of become a reality. And that gets down to, you know, contractual sort of setups, and it's a little bit, you know, boring and wonky. But when we started our partnership with Luis, their community expressed that they had significant interest in being able to develop 100% daytime solar by, you know, it was 2024 at the time. And I think we've even walked that number back. But what that does is, for a wholesale provider like ourselves, the amount of renewable energy that they're able to develop makes that bucket somewhat smaller. So the amount of electrons that Guzman Energy is selling and therefore earning profit on gets smaller. So when you're in these types of relationships, you have to have a willing partner that sort of sees the vision and the evolution of the energy economy. And when we started our relationship with Luis, we knew that we were going to allow that level of development. You know, number one, it's what the community wants to do. We want to be a good partner. It's good for the environment, and also ultimately makes economic sense as the marketplace continues to transition. And so that is the essence of how Kit Carson was allowed to be able to do what they did. Is, as we were negotiating and coming to our partnership with Kit Carson, they expressed interest in wanting to have it. It was important to their constituents. It was important to their leadership. And so we structured the transaction in such a way that enabled them to be able to do that. We supported that, and we continue to support it. There's a few different ways that you can do that. Kit Carson did it in a way that takes away from your bucket of electrons. However, you can do it in different ways, where if you have a utility scale solar project, you can generate your own electrons from a utility scale solar project and still be getting to sort of a renewable path in that way. And so a little bit different path, but for Kit Carson, that's how they structured and did their projects. One thing, and I'm down to about 4 minutes, so I'll get ready to kind of cut myself off. But people think all the time, and this is just an important lesson when we think about the energy markets today. And there's this thing, there's energy, and then there's capacity. And capacity is the tougher part of the equation. Capacity is the function and the level that is Kit Carson's entire load at any time during a given day, during a given year. And so you have to, as an energy provider, make sure that at any given hour, you're prepared to meet that demand. And that demand has to be assigned to a specific generation asset that can meet that demand. And the attributes that are given to solar and that are given to wind powered projects are not the same level of capacity. So when you're putting in renewables, you have to build a stack of generation assets that enable you to cover that capacity requirement. Because the easiest question is, why can't we be 100% solar all the time? The cliche always becomes, well, what do you do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? How do you serve your loads? Why can't I just put solar on my house? And why can't I just have solar on my house and then, not need to even plug into the grid or the system at all? And so those are very fair and reasonable questions, but this capacity and this requirement to be able to serve is one of those friction points between a renewable transition and electric reliability that continues to sort of lean on this grid and this system. And that's a little bit of a complicated concept, but it's an important one as you think about it, because all the time we get asked, why can't I just have solar on my house? Or why do we even need any fossil fuel fired? And that's to be able to cover for the periods when there's not the wind or the sun shining or blowing. And so, Camilla, that was a ton of information in a very rapid period of time. So I hope that we'll be able to come back to some of that in some of the Q&A, but I wanted to get sort of out as much as I could to everybody to be able to have a more informed sort of Q&A.
Wow. And that was a lot of information. I'm so impressed with what you were able to accomplish in that 15 minutes. And thank you for that. It was really kind of, you delivered it in a fun way. So I think I get it.
That's a lot of stuff. So for the physics and the historians, don't butcher me in the comments, but I'll be happy to elaborate on any of those things that we talked about in sort of the Q&A period. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, we heard from Luis and Chris, and they both presented kind of the story, their versions of the story, and a little bit of Energy 101 in there. But I just want to take a step back and ask Luis a question to kind of kick off our moderated discussion. So, Luis, I'm wondering if you might be able to, in 2 minutes, describe how your connection to the land and your stewardship ethic has informed your leadership at Kit Carson.
Well, Camilla, that's a great question. Thank you. I think it's maybe not mine, but the communities. I mean, growing up in Taos, you really get an appreciation of the value of clean water, clean air, being able to go hiking, biking, just walk outdoors, and so I think you get that appreciation when you leave Taos, go to a bigger city, and everything is kind of just cluttered. There's no nature. Then you come back, and then you're in a position where you can really facilitate change through energy. And so I wanted to keep Taos special. And how do you do that delivering electricity? It's by the type of electricity. And so it really was kind of maintaining the quality of life, right? Maintaining the magic of the Taos Mountain that draws so many people, international and national to Taos. So just that, and then walking the talk, right? I mean, here at the co-op, we have solar arrays. You have to walk the talk. We own our own facilities, and I think leadership in this space is you have to really walk the talk and do what the members say. I keep going back to that, Camille, but I think that's paramount in the co-op program. Is we're member driven. It's a democratic process, and we have to satisfy those. They own the co-op, and it's our economy. We skiing, hiking, fishing, camping. That's our economy. So we should do everything that we can to make sure we leave it better than we found it. And so I think that's really what drives me, and then that is kind of portrayed in our leadership of being out in front. Because I think the other thing we want to do is we can prove it can be done. Some of the stuff that me and Chris discussed, co-ops and utilities have talked in the boardroom for years of the what ifs. We've actually taken that and actually done it. so to prove to people that it can be done. And if you can do it with a small rural co-op, with, when we got Guzman, a relatively unknown power supplier, all of a sudden, 5 years later, everyone knows about Kit Carson and everyone knows about Guzman. So the model works. But I think it's really listening to your members and walking the talk.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Chris, you explained a little bit about the nature of Guzman Energy's relationship to Kit Carson Electric. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more and get into how this partnership is unique in the co-op industry.
No, absolutely. I think, when you're small, like we are when we started out, and we've continued to grow and had some success, but, Kit Carson was really our first franchise transaction, and Luis alluded to it a little bit, but we were both taking a pretty big leap of faith on each other. So, we have great relationships with all of our, customers and loads that we work with, but our Kit Carson relationship is really special and unique because we were all taking some pretty significant risks together. The Kit Carson had in their previous contracts very cumbersome, very onerous requirements. And it's, and it's not that that's outside of the norm. I mean, this is a little bit like thinking if you had a personal relationship with your cable provider, and you're like, Jim, my TV is not coming in great today. And you're, it's not really how the industry has worked from sort of that personal level. And we, starting out, knew and continue to know that, if we don't work close and build and develop partnerships, not just contractual relationships with the communities that we serve, that there's no way we're going to be able to continue to be successful. And there's no way that we'll be able to sort of execute the broader mission of what our company is trying to do, which is really to sort of facilitate this transition into a more distributed, a greener, a more localized energy economy that we think continues to drive success in the communities. And so that really became our focus. And Luis alluded to it earlier, you have rural areas where you have a talent gap and you have people that are leaving and departing. And if you think about, one of the largest components of a business's cost in locating in an area is their power supply cost. And, you think that Target corporate doesn't know what the power price of developing a large store will be. You think industry doesn't know what it will cost to be able to serve power in regions. And so rural communities in particular are impacted by this because they really haven't had sort of a voice. And that is a part of what we wanted to crack and achieve and make a little bit better. And so contractually before, in the most simplest terms, they had a cap on the amount of renewable power that they could have on their system. We removed that cap. We just, and that is a unique piece inside of our relationship, and it's a unique piece inside of the industry itself. But frankly, like that is the direction it's going. And if you want to be able to serve wholesale power in the 21st century and going forward, you're going to have to find other ways and other sort of systems to be able to work together and compete together and move forward in this economy. And that's a really unique piece of our relationship. We also, sincerely care about the Taos community. We, to the best that we can, try to be involved. We try to support educational initiatives and just really work because, number one, of course, we're good guys. But number two, as you build out a community, strengthen a community, develop and invest in a community, the community grows, the community strengthens, and you're able to continue to sort of grow and prosper together. And that rising tide sort of lifts all boats. And it takes, we work very closely together. We work very closely to address issues or concerns that impact and affect us both, issues and concerns that only impact and affect one or two of us. We just care together on this collective path. And the overall objective is to make the communities in the three counties that Luis serves as economically competitive as they can be, a first-rate place to go and be able to have, a first-rate power supply that's clean, broadband that's efficient and allows people to be able to work in a 21st century economy. And we literally take it to heart that we're in that together. And so those are all of the qualitative things. But the quantitative thing was really, we don't have a cap on the amount of renewables that somebody can be able to have. And Kit Carson was our first sort of test case in partnership where we were able to do that. So.
Wow, great. Thank you. And back to you, Luis. The amazing Kit Carson Electric is expected to reach 100% daytime solar by 2022. Can you talk about what is next for Kit Carson and what barriers you anticipate?
Okay, thank you for that question, Camilla. So we'll hit that at the end of this year. So we're right now about a year ahead of schedule, which is good. Our next step is really storage. How do we integrate storage? What type of storage do we use? And I think the real big project that we're working on is electric vehicles and fleets. If we really want to clean up the environment or mitigate pollution, it's automobiles. The transportation sector is by far the largest polluter in this country, probably the world, but at least in this country and in this area because we have a lot of tourists. So we again went back to the membership. We had a kickoff meeting to see how many leaders we could get. We got every town and county, and we actually extended. We want to make it regional, so we actually invited our neighboring co-op to the south, because the tourism actually starts south of us, to see if we could, set up a charging station plan for the region. Could we start encouraging municipalities, Kit Carson, Hemmons Electric, to start trying EVs? Can we start educating elected officials on some of the pros and cons of EVs, if there are, but start an education process, and then start looking for funds of how do we get the first school bus, and how do we get the first line truck, and it's really taken off. So we had about 70 people. We gave them about a week break, then invited volunteers to participate in working groups so we could start putting all these in a strategic plan and priorities. And now we probably have too many volunteers, right? It's trying to figure out how do you manage. We got the state of New Mexico now wants to be part of it. And just not the state of New Mexico, but we have the environment department and we have the tourism department. We have our national group wants to be part of it. And so our big next goal is how do you electrify a fleet in rural New Mexico? And how do you do that to make it that everyone has access? We know the people who can afford the Teslas and, the higher end, they'll always be taken care of, and that's great. How do we take care of that middle income and that low income that may never see the inside of an EV? And I think that's not right. And so part of any of the programs we've done, Camilla, have been not really, can I offer a gig or a solar to the more affluent people? Can I offer it to the low income? Because if the wealthy is the low hanging fruit. It's the low income we really need to focus on. And so that's really our next big project. And what kind of economy can we derive out of that? Will it enhance tourism? Will we get more people up here? Can we start, and what kind of skill sets? Can we start converting mechanics to people who work on EVs? So it's also given our colleges and universities a goal to now support us with local folks. So it creates an economy. Yeah. So that's our project we're working on now.
And Luis, what are the various, could you elaborate on that piece a little bit more, the various economic development opportunities that are driven by both this kind of renewable energy push and the broadband access?
So on the renewable energy, and I'm trying to also address one of some of the questions in the chat. One of the goals we did on the renewable energy, it was going to be all built with local labor. And so we wouldn't have to import people from out of town to build. And so we accomplished that. You know, we had three developers in town. I couldn't get them to talk to each other. So I had a meeting. I put them in my office for an hour, and I said, whoever stays in my office and agrees to work with each other, the board has agreed you're going to build our solar. So when I came back, two of the three were there, and they've built all our solar, all with the local labor. So we've developed skills that now they're working in Albuquerque and Santa Fe and Denver, working those arrays. But this is home base. So we expect the same thing on EV, you know, whether it's enhancing, you know, right now, there's not any car rental place. Maybe we can get someone to bring in a car rental that just focuses on EVs. How do you service EVs, right? Not a lot of moving parts, but still things break. And can we create an economy around service? How does EV enhance tourism and outdoor recreation? You know, really think about it. If you're really going to think about clean energy, a clean environment and clean water, well, you should drive up to the kind of head end of a trail in an EV. So I think maybe that will enhance or at least augment a strong tourism position that we have. And so I think one of maybe the best things is we can export our talent to other locations in New Mexico to build their networks out, and then they can come back home. So that way they're always working, right? If we don't have work, they go to Santa Fe or they go to Espanola or they go to Albuquerque. I think that the difference with us is we really put everything on the table. We don't think there's any barriers we can't overcome until we can't overcome them. But we don't go in with that mindset that, no, we can't do this. And it really has worked. You know, Camille, to close on that question, when we built our broadband, it was all with local labor. 420 people working right after kind of that 2008 recession where a lot of people were looking for work. We put over 400 people to work for 18 months, but they got all these skill sets. And so, you know, that really is a co-op model, is members helping members.
Right. Amazing. Last question for Chris. Chris, what types of incentives do you think that co-ops need to be able to accomplish what Kit Carson Electric has accomplished with renewables and broadband?
Yeah, I think Luis alluded to it a little bit earlier, but you know, an important thing for this audience to know and everybody to know is that the boards of these cooperatives are elected by the community. And then those boards govern the directions that these communities go. And so it really is, you know, in the truest sense, a democratic process for what a community wants. And I think, you know, Luis has gone, you know, very eloquently spoken for the last, you know, several minutes about things that are important to his community. You know, their community was, of course, wanted and had cost savings. Luis, you know, there's complexity in the economics of how Luis exited, that he had to have sort of a breakup fee, and he's had to pay on some of that over a period of time. But once that's done in about 14 months, Luis will have in Kit Carson the lowest wholesale rates in any cooperative in the country. And that is the equivalent of being able to give an economic stimulus check to your community that can be used in very different ways. Also, it was very important for their community to, you know, have renewables and all of the things associated with renewables, not only from, you know, the economic perspective, but from the environmental perspective. And so their community really had a very clear vision about what they wanted in their relationships from their power supplier and what they wanted to do as far as just power supply in general and renewables. And that, you know, comes from the population, and that goes into, you know, what their board has been able to accomplish and been able to direct their community, you know, their power supplier, us, to be able to do. So it really starts at a community level. And for co-ops, I think that's a big departure, because for the longest time, there was really only sort of one-stop shopping. You didn't have choice. But what I would say is kind of the most important message to be able to get out is to be able to say, listen, there is choices in the power supply markets, and there are partners that allow you to be able to have a greater voice in what you want your resource mix to look like, what you want your community profile to look like and what type of economic incentives you want to be able to bring to your community. And that really does start at the community level. And so, it's hard for me to say that I could tell a community in Wyoming what is important for them versus what would be important for a community in New Mexico. But it's like anything in a democratic process. The community has to get involved, make their voices known, and know that there is an opportunity to have this. And sort of the most powerful piece that we have with that is our vote, to vote for cooperative members that sort of represent what's important to these communities. And then what Guzman does is try to, not tell a community what's important for them, but to react to what's important to those communities and be able to give them those choices and those opportunities to live that vision for their own community. And so, and ours happens to be aligned with economic competitiveness, renewables, and market-driven forces. And so, that has been consistent with what Luis and his community tried to do. And so we look for other communities that are interested in those things. And one last thing, it takes, what Luis did takes leadership, and it takes a lot of guts. He said that he took a risk on a relatively unknown power supplier, and that's absolutely true. And some people aren't comfortable with that, and some people are, afraid of transition and change. I think all of us are in some sense. And so it takes a lot of courage to be able to do those things. But, it really is a democratic process for people to get involved in. And how do you shape those incentives is you vote, and you put a higher premium on what's going on in these cooperative boards that may have not had historical interest or sort of primary drivers inside of the community.
That's great. It's really just amazing. I'm still like in awe about the kind of the business model of Guzman Energy. So it's really incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So now we have some time to answer questions from the audience. So if you're listening and you have questions, put them in, and Bianca's going to feed them to me, and I will kick that off right now. So we have a couple of questions here. I think you might have just answered this, Chris, about how was Kit Carson able to get leaders as well as its own board to agree to convert to renewable energy. But maybe Luis, you want to chime in about that. How did you get the board to agree to convert to renewable energy?
Again, thanks for the question, Camilla. Just a lot of communication working with the board. And then, we had a lot of public meetings. So it wasn't so much me getting the board comfortable. It was them listening from the members. And really, I just play a support role in that instant where, based on what the members want, then how do you, Luis, formulate a plan and give us the pros and cons. So I think that was relatively easy in that case. And then the other thing is lead by example. So we built 4 of our own arrays and got a lot of data and got a lot of input on it. And most of it was positive. So, when you start getting some positive traction on a project, and members then, we put an array at the University of New Mexico Taos campus. Then all of a sudden the other college in our area wanted an array. So then it became competitive. And it just forced the board to say, okay, if you guys want renewables, that's the way we're going to do it. And you fast forward and we probably have over 20 projects distributed around the network. So it's really listening to the members and then just myself supporting and filling in the gaps.
Great. We have a couple of questions related to, we understand 100% daytime solar. So I'm going to read 2 questions to you. Are you backing up daytime solar with fossil fuel generation capacity? How do you manage summer and winter peaks? And then the second question, I guess that was 2 questions, but they're together. The second question is, what about storage covering when the sun doesn't shine?
Yeah, no, and I think those are great questions, and they're the standard sort of typical questions, and it's a well-informed question about what exactly is going on during those periods. And so, it gets a little academic on the capacity piece of it, because there is a requirement. Reliability is such an important element of serving power, second only to price, and in most cases more so than price. The hospital lights need to be on in the middle of the night. You have to have reliability to be able to, consider yourself a power supplier. And so how reliability is structured today is that, there is capacity credits that are given to renewable assets. But, for an oversimplification, maybe it's only 30% of the output of that wind farm, or 25% of the output of solar. And that varies on regions and varies on what balancing authorities credit for capacity for particular types of assets. So you have to make up that remaining delta today, in most cases, with some type of fossil fuel generation, whether it's a baseload coal or a natural gas plant. And then the natural question becomes, well, why not, batteries? Because the ultimate vision is that you're generating wind, you're generating solar, you're charging a battery that can then, over the course of the night, be discharged. You're charging an electrical vehicle during the day or during the night. And when your power supply is short on your own home, you're able to plug an electric vehicle in to charge your house. If you've seen this new Ford commercial for the Ford Lightning, it's pretty cool. They plug their truck in and charge their house. And so all of those things will begin to happen and move forward. But in the near term, it's not cost effective, and it's like a flat screen TV. When the first flat screen TV came out, it cost $5,000, for somebody to be able to buy one. And now you can get one in Walmart for $79 that's 60 inches wide. And so as the cost curve of these types of technologies come down, increasingly batteries will begin to take the place of what we think now of this traditional fossil fuel fired economy, but it's just really a cost question. And so, now when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, there is a need to be able to lean on traditional fossil fuel assets to be able to cover those periods. Increasingly, that will shift towards a battery mix, but it will just be as the cost curve of that comes down over time. And so, you manage and swing on peak loads by having capacity that covers up to a historical peak. And that capacity means that you're able to call on a resource to meet that electricity demand. And so that's generally how it works. And the desk that's over here, sitting about 20 yards from me right now, manages that, by the hour, by the minute for Kit Carson's load. As the sun goes down, they'll bring on additional fossil fuel resource to be able to cover it. As the wind penetration lessens, they'll bring on a different fossil fuel source, and it's all happening real time inside of the market, inside of the grid.
Okay, so there is we're still on fossil fuels until we have some better battery and other storage options. Yeah,
but an important point on that, Camilla, is that doesn't mean it's running all the time. If you're a dispatchable unit is a much more valuable unit than something that would just be running all the time. So if your renewables are blunted or your peaks shoots up, there are smart abilities to be able to bring on a gas plant for a very short period of time and then shut it back down. It's harder with coal and harder with some of the other fossil resources, but that goes to a point that Luis is beginning to talk about. In lockstep with power generation is the importance of broadband and the ability to be able to have systems that can communicate to each other in real time, such that those adjustments can be made in efficient ways. And that just goes to this broader theory around a smart grid and just sort of the importance of broadband as associated with electrical power generation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Another question from the audience is, to what extent has renewable energy been economically beneficial for Kit Carson and Guzman?
So Camilla, thanks for that question. Yes, in the long run, it's going to be very economical. I mean, the last project that we're building with storage, is less than 3 cents. And fossil fuel is still in 5.5 cents. And I think the difference with our model versus the conventional model is mine is local. So I don't have any transmission. I don't have to transmit it hundreds of miles to get here. It's basically in our backyard. So there's additional savings because now I don't have the transmission cost. And I do think storage is that's going to become more and more cheaper over time. I think the other value that people don't talk about, or at least the fossil fuel folks don't talk about, is the value it gives to our members, our business to market their product. You know, if they can market that their cosmetics are made all natural and with clean energy, and you know the manufacturing process that used electricity was good for the environment. You know, what value does that give them? It gives them potentially more market share, more profit. You know, what value does it give to a Taos Ski Valley who says, hey, all our lifts are running on renewable energy. And so we are really taking care of our environment. So I think the really understated value is how it helps the members in their business, in their way of life. I mean, if you're an outfitter and or you guide, you want clean air, clean water, so you can bring people from out of state to hunt. So what value does that give them that we still have good air and clean water? So it's brought a tremendous amount of benefits, and I think it really has enhanced the quality of life. And again, so I look as much as the bill, as much as what the other impacts that affect us every single day are. And so it's brought tremendous value, both the renewable energy, and again, kind of underscore Guzman's supporting that, right? I've been through other power suppliers that say, cut, stop, you know, we're losing revenue, you can't do anymore. So there really is a multi-stream or multi-value stream to that question, just not what the cost of electricity is. So I do think it's going to put us really ahead of the pack when it comes to our economy.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just expand quickly on for us, you know, like it literally is the future of how power supply will be done and how we believe that the grid will continue to evolve. And so just in the most basic sense, you know, if you wanted to be very short-sighted in your business, we would say, no, Luis, you can't do this because I want to sell you some extra orange Home Depot buckets of electrons each month. But that is extremely short-sighted in what we're trying to do, because we want to serve 15 other co-ops, and we want to be able to bring that to this sort of model and difference to a much broader community. And so for us, you know, it's been one of the best sort of long-term economic decisions we've made in the life of the company, is be able to say and really go back to that choice and opportunity for communities to have just a much bigger and broader role in discussing their own, you know, their own future and what they want to do. And there's, you know, we also benefit from it on the wholesale side. You know, Luis talked about the price. You know, we're in the process now of developing multiple renewable, you know, utility scale assets that we will benefit from just in our own portfolio of being able to serve power and load. So we see it from two sides. And so the economic benefit is, you know, it's unquestionable. I think, you know, Luis talked about all of the intangible benefits of the environment, the intangible benefits of branding of his community, the intangible benefits of just, you know, making it such a better, more first-rate place to live for all of its inhabitants. I think is, you know, how do you put really a price tag on that? It's extremely difficult and hard because the benefits are many and vast.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have 3 more questions and we have about 5 more minutes. So I think we can get through these last 3 questions. And if
we'll go to the
round. Yeah. And if anyone has questions that we don't get to, you can always send them to us. You can put them in the chat now, and we'll try to get answers to you later. All right. So what is the business model of Guzman Energy, Chris?
Yeah, so it's, you know, it is a energy company that is dedicated to facilitating the transition for its customers. And so in the most basic sense, we find a customer who has, you know, who's dissatisfied with their current provider, who's in the marketplace looking for a new provider, or, you know, whatever set of circumstance, co-op, municipality, tribe, is out, shopping for a new provider, we begin working very closely with that group. We tailor a path and a custom-made solution for them to be able to sort of meet their community and regional goals. And that's, built in sort of a custom tailored package with them and alongside them. And, in most cases, we have an ability to be able to source the power at a economically cheaper rate, and it's cleaner. And that just has to do with, flexibility and being able to manage and move power in an efficient way across the West. And that gives us, some degree of competitive advantage to be able to be cost competitive for the communities, be able to give them choice, and for a private company to still, for a community to lower its prices, and for a private company to still be able to earn a return. And that is a pretty compelling and impactful capitalist story that I think touches on sort of the best aspects of capitalism and free markets. And that's, in general, how we do it. And so I saw a question in here, and I can, jump on the speed round. It talked a little bit about the storm earlier this year. We had no impact. So our customers had zero curtailments, zero loss of reliability, and zero increase in their cost. And there's 100 different reasons why that took place, but it's very deliberately the type of system and the type of company that we've been able to do. Luis in his contract pays a fixed price contract. And this goes back to our business model. We take the risk of a spike in market prices, and our ability to manage his load and to deliver the reliable source of power is what our responsibility is in this contract. And so during the periods, both last summer in California and in February of this year, where there was so much volatility in Texas, none of our customers experienced a single second without power, and none of them saw a price increase. And so that's an attribute to our operations team that manages our loads.
Wow. All right, and final question. How much more is the retail price of electricity to their customers versus the wholesale price?
So I'll give this one to Luis, because I have absolutely zero power over retail prices.
So that really depends based on consumer class. So residential's, if I'm paying, for an example, 5 cents for wholesale, the retail is probably 12 or 13 cents. And that difference is really to pay for the infrastructure to deliver. Commercials generally have a lower rate. So it really depends on the type of class, but for most people talk about residential. We have about a 7 to 8 cent on top of the wholesale cost, and that's to pay for infrastructure, employees to maintain it, all the systems we've talked about, which is pretty standard. Once we pay our exit fee, as Chris said, then the retail rate will reflect, because then we'll have a overall lower rate, because my wholesale rate will be lower. I think what's important is retail rates always seem to be going up anyway, because that's different than the wholesale side. We still have to, put poles and wires and transformers and meters and replace them over time. We live in a forested area, so we have a lot more maintenance for tree trimming, so we don't cause forest fires. That causes our maintenance expenses to be much higher than you lived in a rural area that was flat, or an urban area who had very little trees. So I think it's also respective to what areas you serve.
Great. Thank you. This has just been really amazing. I don't know about everyone else, but I learned a whole lot, and we were just really excited to have you both here. Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Chris, for joining us today. And thanks to everybody in the audience for listening and your questions and your enthusiasm for this event. I want to thank our team at HECHO, Bianca and Amy, and thank our partners at NWF for helping to make this event possible. We are going to be posting some information about us, HECHO, in the chat. We're hoping that you guys can keep up with us. You can sign up for our newsletter or follow us on social. If you're interested in advocacy, please sign up for our advocacy network on our website. We're really hoping to take some of the lessons learned from this presentation and put them into policy recommendations that can go into some of the infrastructure proposals, policy proposals that our Congress is going to be discussing soon. And so we're hoping to get your help to advocate for things that make it possible for us to be able to have more success stories like Kit Carson and Guzman. Right, and we, I think this is the first event in our Clean Economy and Solutions in Action, so we're looking to develop some more of those. So if you like this event, stay tuned for the next ones. And other than that, thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Camilla. Thanks to HECHO. This was great. Thanks, Luis. Always great to share the mic with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thanks to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.